Eternal soldier, the fallen, first American soldier. Born in the rural heartlands of Virginia, I was the eldest of 5 children in a family that valued freedom and hard work above all. My early years were filled with the responsibilities of farm life, helping my father in the fields and looking after my younger siblings while my mother tended to the home. It was a simple life, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythm of nature. Despite the hardships, there was a profound sense of community and togetherness in our small town. My parents, steadfast in their ideals, instilled in us a love for the burgeoning nation and the principles it stood for. I remember vividly the tales my father would recount by the fireplace, stories of settlers and patriots, each one a seed planted in my young, impressionable mind about the virtues of courage and sacrifice. As I grew into a young man, the winds of change were blowing across the colonies. The air was thick with talk of revolution and the need for independence from British rule. My heart swelled with a desire to play my part, to stand up for the liberties my family cherished. It wasn't just a sense of duty, it was a calling. Leaving behind the tearful eyes of my mother and the proud nod of my father, I joined the Continental Army with a heavy heart but unshakable resolve. My siblings, too young to fight, stayed behind with promises to look after the farm. My sweetheart Mary, whom I intended to marry once I returned, gave me a locket to keep close, a reminder of the love and life awaiting me. This decision to fight was driven by more than youthful zeal. It was fueled by a belief in a cause greater than myself. As I put on the uniform, I carried not just my family's hopes, but the dreams of all those yearning for a world where freedom was not just a privilege but a right. And so I marched off to war, naive and filled with visions of heroism, unaware of the true costs that lay ahead. The Revolutionary War. During the siege of Yorktown, the last major battle of the Revolutionary War, I endured conditions that tested every fiber of my being. The early optimism of our cause was now shadowed by the harsh realities of war. Supplies were scarce, we were often cold and hungry, our uniforms tattered. Yet the belief in the fight for freedom kept our spirits high, despite the biting cold and gnawing hunger. The British fortifications at Yorktown were formidable. Our Continental Army, aided by French forces, surrounded the enemy, laying siege with constant artillery barrages. Day and night blended into a continuous loop of cannon fire, musket shots, and the cries of the wounded. Amidst the chaos, General Washington's resolve was our beacon. His presence on the battlefield inspired us to push beyond our physical limits. As the siege stretched on, our supplies thinned even further. We shared what little food we had, our meals often consisting of nothing more than hardtack and the occasional scrap of meat. Yet, it was our thirst for independence that truly sustained us. We believed, wholeheartedly, in the birth of a nation founded on principles of liberty and justice for all, a stark contrast to the life under British rule which dictated our destinies without our consent. In the final days of the battle, as victory seemed within grasp, my company was tasked with a crucial assault. We were to advance under the cover of darkness and silence the enemy's guns that raked our lines mercilessly. Stealthily, we crept closer to the fortifications, the sounds of our soft treads masked by the intermittent booms of distant cannons. The enemy, however, was vigilant. As we neared our objective, a flare shot up into the night sky, bathing the battlefield in a ghostly light. In an instant, the quiet was shattered by the roar of gunfire. Bullets hissed past, and cannon fire resumed with renewed fury. We pressed on, driven by desperation and the unyielding desire for freedom. I remember charging towards the redoubt, my heart pounding in my chest, my breaths quick and shallow. Then a sharp pain erupted in my side. I stumbled, feeling the warmth of my own blood soaking through my uniform. As I fell to the ground, my musket slipping from my grasp, the sounds of battle seemed to fade away. My vision blurred, but my mind was clear. I lay there, looking up at the stars peeking through the smoke-filled sky, and I thought of the future, a free America. With my last breaths, I felt a profound sense of peace, believing that my sacrifice and that of my comrades would not be in vain. We were fighting for something greater than ourselves, for a dream of freedom that was now surely within reach. As darkness closed in around me, my final thought was a hopeful whisper. Freedom is worth this. But I did not know the full cost, nor the future challenges this new nation would face.
The Civil War. When the drums of war sounded again, this time it was on American soil, a civil conflict, a brothers' war. The ideals of the Union compelled me to enlist once more. This war, I believed, was a righteous one, a necessary battle to preserve the nation and free all its people. At Gettysburg, as we lined up against our brothers from the South, I knew that the fight was for the very soul of America. Our goal was clear and noble: to end the scourge of slavery that marred the land of the free. Each day, as we faced the cannon's roar and the rifle's crack, I fought with the conviction that every American deserved liberty, regardless of the color of their skin. The battle was fierce, with both sides suffering great losses, but the cause felt just beyond doubt. As we charged, pushing back the Confederate line, I felt a surge of hope, a belief that this self-inflicted wound would heal into a stronger, unified nation. In that pivotal moment, a bullet found me. As I lay on that hallowed ground, my vision fading, I held on to the belief that my sacrifice, and that of countless others, would pave the way for a truly united and free America. But I did not know.
World War I. As the world plunged into conflict across the oceans, initially I believed that the Great War was not America's fight. The battles were distant, the reasons complex, and the lands unfamiliar. Yet, as the war dragged on and the tales of atrocities reached our shores, the government's call to arms painted a picture of a world in need of our help. They convinced us that our involvement was not just necessary, it was our patriotic duty to ensure democracy's survival against the forces that threatened it. With a renewed sense of duty, I enlisted once again, driven by the pride of serving my nation and protecting the ideals it stood for. I found myself in the muddy trenches of Europe, where warfare had evolved into something more brutal and impersonal than anything I had known. The landscape was scarred by relentless artillery, and the air was thick with the stench of mustard gas and decay. We were told we were the vanguard of democracy, a force of good in a world teetering on the edge of tyranny. As I lay in the trenches clutching my rifle, I watched young men charge into no man's land, only to be mowed down by machine gun fire. The horror was unimaginable, but my resolve remained firm. We were here to end all wars, to create a lasting peace that would ensure such atrocities never happened again. In one fateful push, as we tried to overtake an enemy trench, I felt a sharp pain and fell to the ground. Lying there, my lifeblood seeping into the foreign soil, I clung to the belief that our involvement would tip the scales toward peace. That my falling, my sacrifice would be the last needed. But I did not know.
World War II. In the early days, as Europe's cities fell like dominoes under the shadow of fascism, I felt a distant empathy. Yet it seemed not our fight, not our war to wage. America was a bastion of peace in a world on fire, or so I thought, until the day infamy struck our own shores at Pearl Harbor. That sudden, vicious attack awakened a fierce patriotism in my young heart, a fiery call to defend our homeland and all it stood for. At just 15, with more courage than years, I lied about my age to stand among those answering the call. It was more than duty. It was a sacred oath to protect the ideals that cradled our daily lives. I enlisted with a heart swollen with pride, eager to restore peace to a world torn asunder. We sailed across oceans, carried not just by ships, but by the weight of our resolve. Landing on the beaches of Normandy on that fateful D-Day, I saw the worst of war yet again. The air was thick with the iron tang of blood and the stench of fear. But above it all, the sharp scent of hope prevailed as we fought our way through barricades and bullets. Each step on the foreign sands, each comrade fallen beside me, deepened my resolve. This was no longer just America's fight. It was a crusade for humanity itself, against an evil that knew no borders. With every town liberated, every grateful face of those we freed from tyranny's grip, I knew this war was just. In the brutal push through the Battle of the Bulge, under the relentless cold and ceaseless fire, I fought with everything I had. A shrapnel burst, sudden and fierce, claimed my vigor but not my spirit. As I lay there, my blood seeping into foreign soil, I felt a profound connection to all I'd fought for. Our victory was near. I could feel it, even as my own battle ended at only 17. But I did not know.
Korean War. Once more, the drumbeats of war called me from the quiet life I had found in the peace following the great conflict of World War II. Korea, a land distant and unknown to many Americans, including myself, suddenly became the stage for yet another battle. At first, I believed this too was not America's war to fight, a sentiment echoed in the hearts of many. Yet when the draft papers arrived, loyalty to my country prevailed over doubt. Our leaders, I trusted, knew the path that honor demanded we tread. So, with the pride of our nation fueling our march, I headed to a foreign land under the banner of the United Nations. We were told we fought to stop the spread of a creeping menace, to preserve a world safe from the clutches of tyranny and communism. These were ideals I understood, ideals worth defending, even in lands that seemed worlds away from the streets of my youth. In the rugged, mountainous terrain of Korea, the war took on a chilling new face. The cold bit through our uniforms, seeping into our bones, just as the realities of this conflict pierced my once unwavering resolve. Night after night, we dug into frozen ground, our positions as hard and cold as the choices that led us there. Firefights erupted as suddenly as storms, and men fell like raindrops in a tempest. The enemy was relentless. The battles blurred into one continuous loop of gunfire, shouts, and the sharp cries of the wounded. I moved through it all, an echo of my former self, driven by duty, moving forward because to stop was to succumb to the overwhelming doubt. In a quiet dawn, obscured by the mist and the lingering smoke of battle, my journey met its abrupt end. As I lay there, the land around me as torn and weary as the hearts of those who fought, I clung to the belief that our cause was just, that my service was true. But I did not know. Vietnam War. The call to arms reached me again as a new conflict emerged, this time in the dense jungles and muddied rivers of Vietnam. Unlike the clear lines of duty drawn in past wars, this one was shrouded in shadows and doubts. Many of us questioned why we were there, but once more, I trusted in the wisdom of our leaders, believing they knew best, and so I went, bearing the weight of my nation's pride. Vietnam was unlike any war I had ever known. The jungle seemed alive, an entity unto itself, thick with the heat and heavy with the scent of decay. Monsoons washed over us, as relentless as the enemy, turning paths into swamps and battles into struggles against nature itself. Every step was uncertain, not just in direction but in purpose, as the lines between right and wrong blurred under the canopy of endless green. Day after day we moved through a landscape that seemed to reject us with every mile. Ambushes were common, erupting into chaos with the crack of a rifle, leaving men to fall silently into the underbrush, forgotten. The horror was not just in the fighting, but in the not knowing, for what, for whom, we truly fought. One sultry night, as we patrolled a village that had become a ghost of itself, the air suddenly erupted with the roar of gunfire. In that moment, caught in the flash of explosions, the ground beneath me gave way. Not just the earth, but all the certainties I had ever held. Shrapnel tore through me, as piercing as the questions I had pushed away. Lying there, the jungle enveloping me in its dark embrace, the sounds of battle fading into cries and whispers, I thought of home. I thought of the reasons we were told to fight and the reasons I could no longer remember. My heart beat a slow retreat as I wondered if any truth would justify this loss, this sacrifice. But I did not know. Modern conflicts, Iraq, Afghanistan. When the towers fell on that September morning, the images of smoke and despair burned into my mind, reigniting the aged fire of duty within me. The rage was powerful, a visceral response to the sight of my country wounded so profoundly. It was not just a call to arms, it was a scream for retribution. Compelled by a renewed sense of justice and the urgent need to defend my homeland, I enlisted once again, this time to seek vengeance against those who dared attack us. Afghanistan was a rugged land of dust and ancient hills, where history was written in blood long before we arrived. We were told we fought to dismantle the architects of terror, to root out the networks that threatened our shores. I fought through the harsh terrain, participating in raids and enduring long, bitter nights under siege. The combat was relentless, with every hill and every village a potential battleground. Amidst firefights and the cries of the wounded, I found a purpose, believing we were making strides towards peace and security once more. Yet, as that war grew, I found myself boarding another plane, this time to Iraq. Uncertainty clouded this new mission. There were whispers of weapons of mass destruction and talks of tyrants, but clear justifications seemed as shifting and elusive as the desert sands. Nevertheless, I trusted in the command, believing that those above me knew the reasons and the risks. In Iraq, the battlefields were different but no less deadly. Urban warfare, guerrilla tactics, and the ever-present threat of ambushes defined our days. We moved through cities shattered by conflict, amidst ruins that echoed both our fears and our resolve. Every corner could hold an enemy, every moment could be our last. And still, I charged forward, because that was what was asked of me. Then, on a routine patrol through a quiet sector that had seen recent skirmishes, the world exploded around me. An IED, hidden beneath the dusty road, detonated with a fury that seemed to split the earth itself. Shrapnel and fire swept through us, and I felt a searing pain that eclipsed all others. As I lay there, the dust settling and my vision dimming, I thought of all the wars, all the battles fought on the promise of peace. With each breath growing fainter, I realized how little I knew of why these conflicts continued, why we were here. Trust in my leaders had led me here, but as the sounds of battle faded into a distant echo, I was left only with questions. But I did not know. Echoes of the fallen. As the final light of consciousness faded on that dusty road in Iraq, my spirit joined the legions of those who had fallen before me. Together we watched from beyond, our souls bound by the common thread of sacrifice, observing the world we had left behind. We had each believed in the noble causes presented to us, in the necessity of our actions to protect and preserve the nation we loved dearly. Yet, from this ethereal vantage, a troubling picture emerged. The country for which we had fought and died, the ideals we had upheld, freedom, justice, democracy, seemed overshadowed by darker motivations. Our beloved homeland, a beacon of hope to so many, appeared increasingly addicted to the mechanisms of war, driven by a hunger for power and an insatiable greed. It was no longer the people who steered the fate of the nation, but rather a complex network of interests, both commercial and political, deeply entwined with the military machine. The Pentagon and the military-industrial complex, those titanic entities we had unwittingly served, now guided the world toward a horizon heavy with conflict. Wars were no longer fought for the reasons we had believed. They had become part of a business strategy, a relentless pursuit of influence and economic gain. The realization was as painful as the wounds that had claimed our lives. Together we watched as new generations were called to arms, sent to distant lands for reasons obscured by rhetoric and manipulation. Our hearts ached for them, for their families, and for the country whose flag we had proudly borne. The cycle of war churned on, fueled by the very things we had hoped to vanquish: tyranny, oppression, and injustice, now cloaked in the guise of national security and global stability. In this solemn assembly of souls, we understood the bitter truth. Our sacrifices, while noble in intention, had been co-opted into a grander scheme we had not known. A scheme that perpetuated conflict and division, not just abroad, but within our own borders. The promise of peace for which we had fought seemed as distant as the stars under which we now dwelled. As spirits untethered from the mortal coil, our final hope lay in the possibility that those still living might see through the veil of deception, that they might understand the true cost of unending conflict and turn back from the brink before it was too late. For the sake of all we had cherished, and for the future generations yet to come, we yearned for a return to the principles that had once defined our nation, a rebirth of the true spirit of democracy, driven by the people, for the people. Only then could the sickly be broken. Only then could the souls of those who had given everything rest in peace, knowing that their sacrifices had finally led to a lasting legacy of true peace and prosperity.